Join us as Ken Honeywell, host of Radio Free Book Club, interviews acclaimed author Barbara Shoup. Barbara is the author of 6 novels, including Everything You Want, and serves as the program director of the Writers Center of Indiana. In this special interview, she and Ken discuss her newest novel, About Grace. Please note, this conversation includes sensitive content that may not be suitable for all listeners.
Okay, hello. This thing looks like it's on. I'm going to turn this up. And Barb, do you want to just say hello just so I can see the levels here?
Hello.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, hello. I'm Ken Honeywell. I'm a writer and a reader from Indianapolis, Indiana. And today I'm talking with Barbara Shoup, author of the new young adult novel from, how do we say the name of your publisher, Barb? Querencia Books. The book is called About Grace. This is Barbara Shoup's 7th published novel. Somewhere
9th.
in there. This is Barb Shoup's 9th published novel. Awesome. A lot of which are for young adults.
Correct.
But highly enjoyable for readers of all ages. I can tell you from experience. Her novels Wish You Were Here and Stranded in Harmony were selected as American Library Association Best Books for Young Adults. Her book Vermeer's Daughter was a School Library Journal Best Adult Book for Young Adults.
Which was sort of funny because it was a young adult book.
Yeah.
I don't know how they did that, but I'll take it.
Barb, you sometimes have adult-ish themes in your
I do, and they're coming-of-age
books.
stories, and I think a lot of adult readers like coming-of-age stories. I do.
Yeah, I do too. Well, let's talk about Grace. First, can you just tell us a little bit about the book? What is About Grace about?
About Grace is about a girl named Grace who is 17 years old. She hails from an unhappy family. Her parents are rather bitterly divorced, and neither one of them particularly wants her around. She has a stepsister by the father whom she absolutely adores. And so that's pretty much her life until she meets Kyle, who just decides he's madly in love with her. And this has never happened to her before. She's never had a boyfriend. She's pretty unconfident about herself and everything. She keeps to herself. But anyway, he's quite wealthy, and he's really nice to her. He loves her. He's kind to her. She doesn't quite know how to deal with that, but okay, who doesn't want that, right?
Right.
He's got his own problems, though. He's rather entitled, like a lot of super wealthy kids are. And he's got a lot of anger issues, although if you would look at his life, you would think, why? Because he gets everything he wants. But nonetheless, he does. And so eventually, he sort of draws her into activities that are illegal and that turn out to make her end up in a juvenile correctional facility and him in a wealthy kids, I guess it's just like a school for troubled kids. So his parents talked the judge into letting him do that. Her parents did not lobby for her, and they let her go to this correctional facility.
Yeah, and it's been her life in the facility.
Yeah, and while she's there, just kind of trying to navigate, there's a lot of stress, a lot of tension. She doesn't really know what to do, but memories of a family friend start to bubble up that she has just kind of kept away and blocked for all these years. And he molested her when she was a little girl over a couple of years period of time. And now suddenly all these things are coming up at the same time that she's trying to figure out how to navigate this period of time that's very difficult, and also to fall out of love with Kyle, because she knows she has to fall out of love with him. But she's having a hard time doing that. So we get a lot of Kyle in the story, even though he's not in the story, because she's remembering him, and a lot of the time he will, when something happens, his response will come to her mind. You know, Kyle would think this, or Kyle would think that, or say that, and so he's present in the novel, even though he's not actually in it, which was kind of fun to do.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where did the idea for About Grace come from?
I did a workshop for girls, incarcerated girls, at what we called the Girls' School for years in Indianapolis. And I did it with Lynn Jones, and we did it, I think, 3 or 4 summers, and we had probably 12 sessions over the course of each summer, and we would work with these girls at the Girls' School, and partly because who wouldn't want to just get out and do something other than be locked up. We would get 15, sometimes 20 girls that would come, and we provided them with notebooks and pencils or whatever, and they would write from prompts. It was amazing to me. They were some of them were so smart and so funny and so wrecked. They were coming from homes where they just didn't have much hope. Nobody in their family had ever been able to get out of whatever rut they were in, and they were in not necessarily for the most terrible things. And, I kept thinking, if these kids were not poor, they would be in therapy. They wouldn't be here because there weren't any people that were not poor there that I could see. And so all of the time that I spent with them thinking about that whole thing, I started to wonder, well, what would happen if a girl who was middle class ended up in a place like that, and how would she end up there? What would it be like? And that was where it started for me, and I didn't really know exactly where it was going to go from there, but I knew that something more than just whatever was going to be happening in that place had to happen. And so a lot of these girls did suffer abuse in their childhoods, and probably not all that long before they ended up where they were. And so that sort of seemed like a logical thing that might occur.
Yeah. So was that? Are you speaking from experience there, Barbara?
I am not.
Yeah.
No, I am not. I did, however, as a teacher of high school kids over 25 years or something, I knew some kids that happened to, and some of those kids had talked to me about it. But mostly it was, it was something that I was interested in, and I did a lot of research and reading. I read other books. I read memoirs. I read all kinds of stuff. And once I got it in my head, certain kinds of things that I felt were true, I just let it go,
Sure.
To see what I would come up with. And it's interesting these days because sometimes people say you can't write about something that you haven't experienced, but I don't believe that that's true. I think that we can write about things that we haven't experienced. We might not get it right, and if we don't get it right, then it shouldn't be published. But I think so many wonderful books come from writers who have not experienced what the books are about. That's our job, right? As writers,
Sure.
We are supposed to be able to get into the head of somebody who is not us.
Well, you've talked a little bit about Grace and who she is and how she came to be incarcerated. There are a few other major characters, a couple other major characters who are incarcerated with Grace. Tell us a little bit about Electra and about Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica sort of gloms onto her right from the get-go,
Mm-hmm.
and Jessica is there because of a meth charge, and she has a little boy. She's around the same age, maybe a little younger, but she has a little boy left at home with her mother and grandmother, and she absolutely is crazy about this little boy, and she talks about him all the time, and her dreams are all about when I get out and what kind of life they're going to have together, and it's going to be so much better, and it's not going to be like her life was before she got here. Her father left when she was pretty young and kind of had another family. So she's just a broken girl. It really just killed me. And like a lot of kids in that situation, and not only kids, but I've seen this with adults who are incarcerated as well, that they get into this religious thing. There are always people who are wanting to come into the prison and work with these kids, and their motive is to turn them into Christians if they're not already. the prisons give these people a lot of space and a lot of rope, and girls are, I think, rewarded for that kind of behavior if they do that. And so she kind of gets all caught up in this religious thing, and that is that kind of way of, if I pray, God will make it happen for me, which of course isn't going to happen. You have to make things happen yourself, and I think a lot of these situations don't quite clarify that for people, that they want the kids to believe, but they're not necessarily preparing them for what it's going to take to get out of there and still believe, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then tell us about Electra.
Well, Electra is interesting to me because I did not know she would be part of it. I mean, I never know exactly what's going to happen or who the people are, but she just came bursting into the book, and I didn't, expect her. I sort of knew Jessica. I recognized her pretty quick, but Electra is just fabulous because she's just wild. And she's always got a red bracelet or a yellow bracelet, and she ends up in solitary all the time. And she's really smart, and she's really funny. And she and Grace, she sort of just makes up her mind. They're in orientation together. She's been there before. But she decides that Grace is going to be friends with her. So whether Grace wants to or not, they are friends. And she turns out to be a really good friend, to Grace in a variety of kinds of ways. And I think it'll be a lasting friendship.
So I know that in the past some of your books have been on banned books lists.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? And do you have any concerns about that for About Grace?
Yeah, I think it could end up there. Because number one, it tells the truth about a very difficult subject, and that is a lot of what's happening with the banning. My novel Wish You Were Here ended up on the most 100 banned books in America list in 1994 or 5. I can't remember. It would have been 1995. So it's in really good company. Lots of good books get banned. Many good books get banned. And nobody wants to have their book banned. It's an ugly, ugly thing. But at the same time, like I said, you look at a lot of these books, and a lot of them are some really, really good books. And the problem that people have is that they feel like they need to protect teenagers from reality.
Well, and a lot of them are painful to read.
They are painful to read. This book would be painful to read. But it does have a hopeful ending. I wouldn't say it's a happy ending exactly, i.e. everything gets tied up and everybody's, lives are changed for the better. That isn't what happens, but that isn't what happens in life either. I like books that have an open-ended feeling, where if the writer has done it well enough, you can imagine the character into the next part of their lives.
Right.
And that's fine with me. I don't like it all neatly tied up. So, it's a book that is painful to read, but it's also a book that I think could make a huge difference to a certain kind of kid. Maybe you have a friend that is molested, but you don't know how to think about that. And this is a book that might help you, not to mention the fact if you are a kid who's been molested and you think, I'm not the only one. I realized this is what this person was doing. I thought it was my fault. And so I'm a big believer in telling the truth to kids. I'll say a quick little anecdote that happened with my novel Stranded in Harmony, which was read by a classroom. I think they were high school juniors at Northwest High School here in Indianapolis. And so in that book, the boy gets paranoid. He thinks his girlfriend is pregnant, and so that a lot of the book is him trying to figure out what the heck he's going to do about that, and how he feels about the girl and his life and all that sort of stuff. And so when I went to this class, we had a pretty interesting discussion about whether or not there should be sex in books that are written for teenagers. And it wasn't explicit sex. We're not talking about really graphic sex that I don't necessarily think should be anywhere, because you don't need it, the suggestion of it and whatever. It was just the fact of it that was a problem. And some of the kids just felt that, one girl said, if you write a scene, if you write about kids having sex, then you're condoning it. And I said, I'm not condoning it, what I'm saying is, or what the book is saying is, it happens, and then there can be consequences, and here are the consequences if something like that, or the potential consequences, if you choose to do that. And one girl said, but there weren't any consequences. Maybe it would have been better, if the girl had been pregnant. And I said, well, I think there were consequences, because I think he treated the girl badly, and he knew that he had done that, and he didn't feel good about it. And so there were emotional consequences to his behavior. And we sort of went back and forth on that for a while. It was pretty cool, really, to hear them talk about it. And then right before the bell, a girl raised her hand, and she hadn't said a word the whole time, and she just said in sort of a quiet voice, I just wanted to say that I'm pregnant. And when I read this book, I understood why my boyfriend acted the way he did. And then the bell rang, and she was gone, and I thought, whoa, that's what books do.
Right. Well, kind of on that note, Barb, I'm a fiction reader, you're a fiction reader, lots of people are not fiction readers. How is approaching this subject in fiction, why should people read that as opposed to just reading memoirs or reading social science books about what happens?
That's such an interesting question, and people will say, I never read fiction, I only read fact, I only want to know, I don't want to know fiction. But what I think is that fiction tells a different kind of truth, and it tells it in a way that makes you feel that you are living that your job as a writer is to get inside somebody else's head and to be that person and to think like that person and to have that person's experiences. And so as a reader, that's what's happening to you. You are living that, and anybody who's ever been, caught up in a book knows that. You are there. It's absolutely so engrossing and so real that you are experiencing what people who are not like yourself experience. And the other thing that I think that is so important is, if you didn't read fiction, you might live your whole life never realizing that other people don't have the same kind of things going on in their heads that you do, and that everybody sees the world differently. You don't know that until you read fiction. I mean, you can say, yeah, I know that, I know about point of view or whatever, but you don't, not really, until you get into somebody else's head. And there's no nonfiction that puts you inside somebody else's head. It can't. But fiction does that, and I think that reading fiction makes you a more compassionate person. You start to think, oh boy, this is the way this person is presenting, or myself for that matter. I act this way, but I feel something totally different. So when people make their judgments about me, they're judging my actions. That's all they can do. And I'm judging another person's actions. That's all I can do. But it makes such a difference if you are aware of the fact that the actions aren't everything, and that, you can feel more compassionate toward people when you try to figure out why it is that they do what they do or say what they say. What's behind that? You can't get that from nonfiction.
So you have taught writing for a long time.
I have indeed.
And, you were the executive director of the Indiana Writers Center for a long time. What has teaching writing meant to you?
I love teaching writing. I learn a lot when I'm teaching writing. Sometimes when I have to, stop and think about how to explain something to a student, I'll say something and think, oh my God, that is so true. Like I was trying to explain to somebody one time what I meant by clarity, what a clear sentence was. And I said, it's like fractions. It's like the least common denominator in fractions. You can't go anywhere else. And the kid's face kind of lit up, and I thought, that's exactly what it is. Who knew? I didn't know that until I said it. And so I love that part of it. I love I love watching writers get better. I've been teaching a class at the Writers Center before COVID. We started right before COVID, of people working on novels. And those writers, if you would look at the first stuff that they turned in and you would look at what they're turning in now, it's completely different. It's really wonderful to see that happen, because you can teach it. You can't teach people to be compassionate. You can't teach them to be curious. You can't, teach them. There are a lot of things you can't teach, but you can teach basic skills. You can help people see what is a good sentence, what sentence doesn't work, what is a good characterization, what isn't. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a joy to me. I really love it. And I also think, especially when I was teaching young people, it was amazing to me how writing helped them see themselves, that I would say, write that, they would write in their journal something, and I might say, write that argument from your mom's point of view. And they would do that, and it would be, oh, I get it, I think they were better people for writing. And I think I think they may have been able to sort out some issues in their lives as teenagers, or at least begin to recognize them, that most people don't even start thinking about until they're in their 30s.
So you've also, over the years, interviewed a lot of writers. What have you learned from interviewing writers?
It's hard for everybody. Nobody. I mean, the better people are, I think the harder it is for them. I have loved interviewing writers because, everybody has a little bit different way of doing it, but essentially it's all the same. You don't know what you're doing. You just kind of crab walk your way through it, and it's full of surprises. There are people who go from an outline and are totally plot oriented, which is fine. I mean, that's a great way to do it if that's the way you want to work. But the writers who are interesting to me are the writers who don't know what they're doing. Like for myself, right now, I've been in between things. I hate it. It drives me crazy. So I was driving past Orchard School on my way to the JCC, and I noticed that they have a little cabin on the kind of back part of their property. And I drove past that and I thought, well, that'd be a great place for a body. And now I can't stop thinking about that.
Yeah, our mutual friend Greg Perry used to say, I have a criminal mind, not a criminal heart.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love crime fiction. So I actually started that today. I wrote the first probably 500 pages. And it's the first idea. I've been casting around for a couple of years for something new, and it was just like you recognize something as your own.
Yeah.
But there it is. So
what advice, give me, 50 words of advice to young writers.
Well, here's my basic advice lately. Consider your deathbed and ask yourself how you will feel if you are on your deathbed and you chose not to write because it was too hard. That's the only question that matters, really. And if you can be honest with yourself, and if your answer is, I think I would be really disappointed, you better write. There are people who just need to write, and it's not about anything but writing. It's not about fame. It's not about any of those things. It's about what the process of writing does for you and how it helps you balance your life. When I'm writing, I'm not here in this world. I'm someplace else, and I need that because I don't do so well in the real world. I mean, I don't get it. I really don't. And so I go to this other place, and when I don't have that place to go to, it's not good for me. So I think, if you want to write, then you have to figure out a way to do it. Most people don't write full-time, don't expect to be able to write full-time as an adult. You write when you can. If that means you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If that means you don't watch TV at night, then don't watch TV at night. You have to choose writing, and you have to keep choosing it. And you have to be disciplined, and you have to talent is, what is talent, talent is curiosity, talent is drive, talent is need. It's not some magic thing that Some people have and some people don't. But you got to just do it and keep on doing it. And hope that your work will find a place. It doesn't always, but you still did it.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. We've been talking to Barb Shoup about her new novel about grace from Querencia Books.
That's right.